to Net Zero event, although this is our first in-person or hybrid event. So we're very excited to have you all joining us today. I'm Geraldine Morris. I'm an Associate Director and the co-head of Carbon Trust Africa. It's a pleasure to host you all here today, and we hope that you'll benefit greatly from what we hope to be some very interesting panel discussions. Just some housekeeping before I hand over to our new CEO, Chris Stark. Our refreshments, as you will have seen, the area is right outside this room. That's where we will be having our tea breaks. Restrooms are out the room to the left and down the stairs, and then you will have also noticed towards the entrance there are some additional restrooms. In the event of any emergency, please follow the emergency exit sign. So there is through the door that you came in, and as you'll see behind me, just off stage there as well. And then the Maslow team will direct us from there. So today we will start off with a welcome address from our CEO, Chris Stark. We have Jared Moodley from the JET IPPMU, who's going to give us our keynote address. And we'll then move into our panel discussions. We'll have a coffee break in between, and then we will have a lunch and networking event afterwards, which we hope you've taken some time to join us for today. So thank you very much again, and I'll hand over to Chris.
Thanks, Geraldine. Can you see me okay in the room? Great, fantastic. Well, thank you very much to Geraldine and to everyone who's come this morning. A very warm welcome to this Carbon Trust event. This is my very first event, actually, so I'm sorry I'm not in the room with you. I'm here in London today. But thank you so much for joining us on such an important discussion, and the agenda looks brilliant today. My name's Chris Stark. I'm the new CEO of the Carbon Trust, based here in London. I'm very proud to take on this role and to lead this organisation. We're a global non-profit organisation advising governments and businesses on our mission to tackle climate change and accelerate the move to net zero. I'm personally very, very tied to that mission. I've just spent the last 6 years here in the UK as the UK's chief climate change advisor. And my work here in the UK led this country to become the first in the world to set net zero into law. I'm very proud of that record, and I'm also very proud of that all around the world now, in countries including South Africa, net zero is the aspiration and the goal there too. My ambition's moved on a bit now. I think we're here now to try and help establish a realistic, achievable path to net zero as quickly as possible, and it's very important that we do that, because net zero is, of course, the goal that we have to reach globally. Net zero CO2 is the point when we will stop warming the planet. Which is, of course, a scientific imperative, but I think increasingly it's as much a scientific imperative as it is an economic imperative that we use net zero to positively shape economies around the world. As we decarbonise, as the pace of decarbonisation increases, we're going to see more and more of the cost reduction in the key technologies that will take us to net zero. It's tremendously exciting. We're going to see the most cost competitive economies embrace those technologies, especially cheap, reliable, renewable energy. And if we can harness that to power new modern industries, new transportation systems, new ways of heating and cooling buildings, we can really do something special here. I think those trends are unstoppable now globally. And I believe decarbonisation is going to increasingly be tied to improved economic performance in the round, and the development, of course, of those key industries I talked about, but especially the jobs that go with those industries. That's the secret, I think, to success in the net zero economy. And that's true for Africa as much as it is for anywhere. Africa's energy system is very much at a crossroads now. Last year, South Africa, of course, had its own very well publicised problems with its energy system. Just as the economics of renewables start to look more and more seductive, we're also seeing the pressure mount across the continent to pursue conventional fossil energy development, locking in new oil and gas use and coal as well. We must do all that we can to avoid that. There isn't really a more important place than Africa, and it's particularly South Africa, to bring people together to discuss the energy transition. So I'm so pleased you're there today. And the just transition, as it's called, from fossil fuels and from coal is absolutely central to what we do at Carbon Trust. I hope we can have a good discussion on that today. I hope we can open up the discussion of how we continue to increase renewables deployment, particularly from the historic highs that we saw in South Africa last year, avoid that load shedding and the delays to decommissioning of coal that I know have also dominated the headlines in the last year. This is an important event. In this event, I hope we will be able to give you a strong sense of how Carbon Trust can help in developing that kind of ambition that I've talked about. This is an important forum. It's a safe place to talk about in more depth the case for Africa to commit even more strongly to net zero. And I think crucially, alongside that, adopt policies that will help achieve that transition even more quickly than it is doing already. There's some important lessons that can be shared and learned from other parts of the world, including in places like the UK. We've made mistakes here in the UK, and I'm very happy to share those kind of things with you. But the other reason it's so important to host this event with you today in Africa is that Africa is also in the grip of the climate crisis itself. There is no other continent that is so impacted by the climate extremes that we are now seeing with so little responsibility for the cause of that. Africa accounts for only astonishingly low numbers, 2 to 3% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, but it is the most vulnerable continent to the impacts of climate change. So justice is a really important theme to the work that we do in the Carbon Trust, and I know in the agenda for today, it's an important theme too for Africa, and of course in other parts of the world too. I know from my own interaction in my last role with the South African Presidential Climate Commission and my good friend Crispin Olver, that the just transition is more than just a slogan in South Africa. We need genuinely people-centric outlooks to make this thing work. Any government planning a transition, any company planning a transition needs to put people at the heart of that. Just transition is central to lots of regions' climate plans, but particular challenge in Africa. And the development challenges in Africa, I think, do require specific attention to make sure that we are building in these climate risks and managing them well, and the opportunities that are there to capture those two to make this transition a success. So in this event, I hope we will explore some of the role that corporates can play in delivering that just transition. And just one final message from me, I think it's really, really critical, and you're going to hear more from Carbon Trust on this, really critical that we find the right balance between efforts to reduce emissions and mitigate climate change and adaptation and resilience planning. Climate resilience needs to be more of a stronger theme. My personal mantra is that we need to achieve net zero in a warming climate, and that is an easy thing to say, but it is difficult to put into practice. So we're going to have to tackle these twin climate challenges together of mitigation and adaptation. It's exciting to think that we can do that well. If we don't do that, both will fail. So it's really important that we start to build those messages together. Businesses in Africa are right on the front line of that challenge. They face a very unique set of challenges in identifying and managing risks to climate change, from climate change. I know that climate resilience is already a very critical topic for corporates across the continent in Africa. I think increasingly it also needs to be central to businesses' strategic growth plans. And hopefully we can demonstrate to you today that Carbon Trust has something to say about that. So lots to discuss. You've got some fabulous speakers coming up. Very sorry that I can't be there with you in person. I give you my solemn commitment that I will be there as soon as possible. And hopefully I can meet some of the people who are in the room today. I'm very committed to making Carbon Trust a global voice, a globally trusted voice, and of course, making it an organization that can help bring together people as you have done at a very important event like this today. So thanks very much for tuning in. I'm going to hand over to you again now, Geraldine. Have a brilliant day, everyone.
Thank you so much, Chris. I think really encouraging words. I'm now going to introduce our keynote speaker, Jared Moodley, who has a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of KwaZulu-Natal and is a professional chartered accountancy qualification from the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. Jared has previously held several roles within RMB's investment banking division. He specialized in the provision of debt solutions for large South African corporates and won the ABSIP, I hope I've said that correctly, 2018 Deal of the Year Award for Life Healthcare's acquisition for the Alliance Medical Group. Jared also critically spearheaded RMB's Shared Value Initiative in 2019, which led to the formation of the bank's Sustainable Finance and ESG Advisory Team in 2021. Jared then took up the role of First Rand Limited Group's first Shared Value Enablement Manager, providing him with a broader platform to drive impact-related activity across the integrated financial services group. Jared's passion to contribute to the national interest led him to recently join the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan Project Management Unit based within the presidency. His focus includes commercial and blended finance considerations for the implementation of the JET IP. He is also an alumni of the Gibbs Business School, Nexus Leadership Course, Duke CE, IEDP, God, there's a lot of acronyms in this one, Leadership Program, and the African Leadership Initiative. Jared has also previously served as a trustee for the First Rand Foundation and currently serves as a trustee on the Boleng Trust and a non-executive board director of the Makers Valley Partnership. We're really honored today to have our keynote address delivered by Jared, and please, let's welcome him up onto the stage.
Thank you for that warm welcome. Good morning, colleagues, those in the room and those that are online. So I put on a suit and tie today, which I haven't done, I think, since pre-COVID. So I'm certainly excited to be here today with you, excited to engage, excited to learn, and definitely excited to share where we are on the Just Energy Transition journey to date. Now, I think in terms of acronyms, let's just start by saying I'm not going to keep saying Just Energy Transition. We're going to go with JET. I'm sure everyone's comfortable with that. And I'm not going to keep saying Projects Management Unit. Okay, we're going to go with PMU on that as well. So I thought a useful backdrop would be a personal reflection back to 2017. I was at RMB. And we were having early conversations on topics such as climate and sustainability and inclusive growth. And I must say it's impressive to see how not just that financial institution, but how every financial institution really has progressed that opportunity since. That includes commitments in terms of financed emissions, resourcing for sustainable finance and the business opportunity behind that, and vastly improving reporting and transparency. Now, I know there's been similar progress across different sectors, and I must be honest, I certainly didn't see this level of progress being achieved back in 2017. Now, from where I stand today, it's clear this progress is not enough. But I feel it's important, colleagues, that we recognize that hard work that's being done. It's institution building work, and we leverage that if we're going to accelerate to net zero. So an important step in this context, and let's see if I can get this clicker right. Yeah. An important step in this context is South Africa's nationally determined contribution. The targets are set for 2030, as you know. And it really sets the country on a trajectory in terms of the reduction in carbon emissions. It is a trajectory that the government is fully committed to. Now, this NDC was well received by the international audience in 2021 with a group of countries now known as the International Partner Group, or IPG, providing an initial pledge of $8.5 billion to the South African cause. Fast forward 1 year, and that cause gets articulated in the JET investment plan, which sets out a 1.5 trillion rand investment need across 3 priority sectors and 2 cross-cutting sectors. And in the process, it becomes a guiding light in South Africa's broader journey to net zero, and in achieving a just transition. But there were questions on implementation, and so the JET PMU was created last year. The JET PMU sits within the Project Management Office of the Presidency and is responsible for progressing the implementation of the JET investment plan. We have a robust governance process, and that includes cabinet approval on key items, and one of those key items was the approval of the JET implementation plan late last year. Now, this was an important step because the implementation plan sets out a roadmap for each of those sectors that I previously discussed. Those sectors have been converted into portfolios, and within the roadmap, within each portfolio, we create responsibility and we provide visibility. There's a consistent architecture to each portfolio. We have a lead institution that chairs the portfolio. We have forums for multi-stakeholder contribution, and then we have dedicated secretariats that manage the workload and engage with the the range of institutions that lead on the relevant work streams. Now, we believe this model and this design will support the implementation of relevant projects at scale, but it is institution building work, colleagues. It is hard work. I'm not going to go into detail on each portfolio, but I think I can rather touch on the highlights. So in electricity, we need to build 14,000 kilometers of transmission line by 2032. By doing that, we will enable the scaling up of renewable energy generation that we need from an energy and electricity security perspective. There's ongoing work focused on strengthening the National Transmission Company of South Africa, but also on developing suitable models that will enable the private sector to participate at scale. There's also a focus within electricity on front-loading and front-ending repowering and repurposing opportunities at various coal-fired power stations well before any potential retirement or decommissioning. This is a really, really important lesson from the Komati decommissioning process, and it's something that's receiving a lot of focus from the PMU. Within green hydrogen and NEVs, the focus there will be around market development in terms of green hydrogen. The country has strategic advantages in terms of being able to compete on a global stage, and it's important that we harness that. And with NEVs, it's really around supporting the automobile manufacturing industry in transitioning. On both portfolios, we'll be looking to the IDC to be the lead institution. I think a little bit more detail will come through on that in the panels, but needless to say that the necessary investment in capabilities and capacity is currently underway. Now, I've always believed that plans of this nature should consider not only sustainability, but should promote equity as well. And that speaks to the importance of the just portfolios. So I'll start with skills. And within skills, it's a three-tier plan. We have proposed a JET office that needs to be located in an appropriate government department. There's a recently launched JET advisory forum, and then there will be skills development zones that focus on opportunities within priority sectors being electricity, green hydrogen, and NEVs. In Mpumalanga, Mpumalanga is a new portfolio that was introduced between the investment plan and the implementation plan and is critical from a just perspective. In that portfolio, we'll be working with the provincial government, we'll be augmenting existing structures, and we will focus on promoting economic diversification opportunities, specifically focused on the Highveld and the coal value chain. Municipalities, colleagues, is a critical portfolio, and I know I've said that a few times. It's going to be key that the level of investment required to modernize grids goes ahead. This is important from an electricity sustainability perspective, but it is also important from an affordability perspective. The level of investment in this portfolio for just infrastructure required is over 200 billion rands. Unlocking that level of capital investment in this portfolio will require a combination of capacity development, reforms on service delivery, and effective financial structuring. The portfolios are enabled by a focus on funding, stakeholder engagement, and M&E. And I think it's important to say that we are going to be introducing new complementary portfolios in the year ahead. That includes the South African Energy Master Plan, or SARM, Road to Rail, and energy efficiency. Relevant roadmaps for each of these portfolios are in the process of being developed. Colleagues, there's been a lot of focus on the financing status, and this is a subject that can easily take me beyond my time allocation. So I'm going to share, I think, a few key points. Firstly, the pledge has increased to closer to $12 billion. That is on the back of new countries joining the IPG, and on the back of countries outside of the IPG supporting and pledging support to South Africa's just energy transition. So that is really positive, because it is, again, this external affirmation that our plan is very credible from a carbon emission perspective, from an investment perspective, and from a just perspective. Now, the IPG pledge, or this pledge that you see of close to 12 billion, is meant to be catalytic in terms of the broader 1.5 trillion rand investment requirement, both in terms of relevant instruments and in terms of focus areas. So a large portion of what you see as concessional and highly concessional funding is meant for the electricity portfolio. I've already touched on some of the detail and complexity in that portfolio. So yes, it has taken time for these funds to flow. I've mentioned the fact that the work that's being done there is hard work, it's institution building work. We are confident that there will be an improvement in terms of the flow of funds in the year ahead. And we also expect that our focus on enabling private sector participation will unlock large amounts of capital in the form of commercial debt and equity. Quickly on grants, the grant component has received a lot of focus, and rightfully so. This is a precious, precious pool of capital. The PMU has prepared a grant register, which is publicly available on the Presidency's website, and we have received a lot of constructive criticism on how grants have been allocated to date. We welcome that, and one of the interventions that we'll be introducing in the year ahead is a JET funding platform. This intervention is really a matchmaking intervention. It'll focus on matching relevant JET IP projects to grant funders, and in the process, we believe it'll improve the transmission of grant funding, and we think it will also provide an invitation to other grant funders in the country to direct funding towards the just energy transition. Other funders, including not just international funders in DFIs, MDBs, and philanthropies, but local funders in philanthropies again. And I think in the context of corporates and corporate CSI, we believe there's a huge opportunity to invite those funders in to support the JET. This is an intervention, colleagues, that I'm particularly excited about. We have spent a lot of time engaging with grant funders and with various project developers and implementing partners, and they really think this funding platform is a much needed intervention. We are taking our time on it. We are not going to rush the launch of it. It will be launched this year, but it is important that we design for scale and that we meet the expectations that are existing on the ground right now. I'll end on 2 points. Firstly, we are on a steep learning curve, and this applies locally and globally. Our international partners have been pragmatic in the context of our electricity crisis. They are seeing challenges, to be frank, in other JETP countries and within their home countries. So I think it's going to be very important that for us to get up the steep learning curve, and we need to. We need to find methods and mechanisms to promote cooperation between public and private sector, and we need to find ways and mechanisms, again, of sharing best practice and sharing knowledge. In that context, the JET implementation plan is very clear. It's fine. It's fine. It is a government plan, but I think it is really clear on the material role that private sector investment will need to play in achieving the objectives. Now, that includes many of you in the audience and online today, and I know it's a challenging business environment, but I call you to action in embracing the trajectory set by the NDC, investing in research and supporting business development and performance whilst accelerating to net zero. Thank you.